Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Adam Stemple. And Adam is a musician, and he's also an author of fantasy books for adults, for children, and young adults. And he's also co-authored a number of books with his mother, who is Jane Yolen. And Jane is she is also a very well-known author of children's books and fantasy books for adults and children as well. And Adam has also written three books on writing fantasy novels. So, for readers unfamiliar with your work, I know I just went through a whole bunch of things that you've written, but how would you describe what you write, and what can readers expect from your latest books?
I am primarily a writer of dark fantasy, and also that borders into horror. I kind of, a few years back, accidentally sold a horror story, and then started to look back on some of my older stuff and thought, have I been a horror writer all along and just thought it was dark fantasy? But there's a lot of crossover between those two genres. So in
Right.
my solo adult writing is primarily dark fantasy and horror, and then the stuff I do with my mom is all over the map. Well, we've got a picture book coming out soon called Daddy Plays a Mean Guitar. We did a picture book called Crow Not Crow. We've done a bunch of middle grade fantasy. We did a historical fantasy book recently with Tachyon. So that's all over the place. Did some graphic novels. But I really consider myself a dark fantasy author.
Okay. And what do you think draws people to these kinds of books?
Well, if I knew that, I would be a lot richer, I think. Marketing books are hard, but what from what I hear from the readers who like it, um, what draws them to my writing is the characters, is the characterizations. I do very fun and interesting characters, and ones that maybe aren't that are pretty unique. I have a fairly strange and twisted view of the world, and my characters reflect that.
Okay. So so when you create your stories, do you really go more on the characters than the plot?
Yeah, yeah, always. And whether, I'm very much a pantser now. I've been more of a plotter in my in earlier times. Um, but in everything I've ever done, it's always got to be the characters driving the plot. Um, and because what drives me the most when I'm consuming other types of media or other authors' books is if the characters act out of character simply to further the plot along. Um, and it can be a subtle mistake, but it's always glaring to me and it drives me nuts. So generally, if I've painted a character into a corner where they have to make a decision that throws the plot out of whack, I'll generally go, okay, let's do this and follow that along. I had a recent book, was the second in my Mika Barehand books, where I wanted to write just a very kind of low stakes story about the friendship between the two characters, and a global conspiracy kind of appeared in the middle of it. And so I and the characters all figured it out at the same time.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
So in all of your books, was there any character that you really loved or hated the most?
The one I love the most right now is actually the one in my most recent books, the Bad
Okay.
Company books, where I've got two of them out. My favorite current character is Quinn Keegan, the Irish American hitman, who's just a complete and utter sociopath, but he's trying to learn. Um, and he has moments where he's just confused by human interactions and moral judgments. And he has one where they're planning to kidnap some people, kidnap a senator's kids, for reasons. And someone's like, "We're kidnapping children." He's like, "No, no, the senator's like 70. His kids are probably in the 50s." And they're still looking at him like it's a bad thing. And he's thinking, I'm usually bad at these moral judgments, but I was pretty sure I had this one right. So he asks, "So should we get their grandchildren then?" And all the other characters are like, "Is he joking?" And they're like, "I'm not sure." But he's just honestly confused by the moral judgments. And for some reason, that entertains me. I'm not sure it says anything good about me, but currently he's my favorite character.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about those books, the last
The,
two books you've written?
the Bad Company books are very fun. They're horror thrillers. Again, unique characters. I started with a hitman, a weather girl who truly is a talented journalist but hasn't had the break, so is a very frustrated weather girl, and a nerdy scientist, all cross paths trapped in a medical research center, where infected people. It's very much a non-shambling a fast zombie book, but also breaks out of I had planned the book to just spend the whole night in that building, but they break out about halfway through, and things get even worse. And what I've discovered, what I love about writing horror is that you are never stuck. You can't get writer's block in horror because you can always just make things worse. So
I suppose that's
they
true.
don't always, but if you're getting stuck, you're like, okay, what if it gets even worse?
So what was the inspiration for the
The
bad
inspiration
books?
was because my wife was working at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, which is actually the biggest hospital in the state of Minnesota, not the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is the most famous. Abbott Northwestern is the biggest. And so I was over there, and so the hospital exists on a couple of different blocks. Um, so there are tunnels beneath the hospital to get underneath the streets, because in Minnesota during the winter, the air kills you because it gets to be like 30 below, and you might not survive a trip across the street. So you go down from this very clean and high tech hospital down into the tunnels, which are just brown doors and some pallets everywhere, and curving strange tunnels. And I thought, well, this is a great place for a zombie apocalypse. And that was the inspiration. And then so from there I started building some characters and trying to figure out where they interact and how they all end up trapped there.
Uh-huh. So what kind of research went into writing the book?
Disturbing, troubling research that has definitely got me on some NSA watch lists. So, for instance, in researching the sequel, so the sequel just came out, started this year. The first book was called Bad Company. The second book that just came out is called Company Men. And so for that one, during a single week of research, my browser history, my search history, included searching for American-made 45s with what is the highest capacity 45. So how many, the one with the most bullets it can hold. Best sniper rifles, special forces sniper rifles. A couple of days on Google Maps tracking out approaches to the DEA building in downtown Detroit, which is right next to the Department of Homeland Security building as well. So angles and approaches from there. I did spot some weaknesses, and if they talk to me, I can tell them how to shore up their security there. And then finally, the coup de grace for all this was floor plans of the U.S. Capitol in D.C.
Whoa, you're on
So
some
that's the
lists.
so
You
that's
are
the kind of
definitely
research
going to
I
be
did.
you're definitely going to be on some of
Oh yeah,
those
for
lists.
the first book, I spent about 2 weeks researching explosives you could make from chemicals found in a medical research laboratory. So that was so. Yeah, no, I assume that the NSA has a novelist tag that they put on people because
I would
they
hope
got to be
so.
seeing this like, okay, we've got a live threat, we've got an active threat, we got oh shit, it's a novelist. Never mind.
That's a good question. I wonder if they do.
Oh, they have to. I met an NSA guy once who said, "Oh yeah, no, we definitely looked at those those searches." And for a while, my buddy John and I, back in the '80s, whenever we called each other just for fun, uh, I'd say fertilizer, and he'd say federal building, and then we'd say, "Now that everybody's on the line, what are you doing today, buddy?" And he's and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, no, we definitely thought you guys were assholes, but you definitely got tagged." That definitely trips some
Okay.
alarms.
So why don't you tell me about some of the other books that you just finished working on?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I had 3 books come out last year, basically. The third, I finished up a trilogy, the Mika Bearhand books, which is Duster, Gallic, and Threll, which were really military fantasy, secondary world fantasy. Those were the first 3 books that I self-published, or the first trilogy that I self-published. And those were very fun. That was because that was the main character in that. Basically, the main 2 characters are old veterans, and the main character, the main protagonist, is old and fat and out of shape and just wants to be a tavern keeper. So that was very fun to write an over 40s hero dealing with trying to get back into being heroic again, and it's not going well. There's a very fun scene where he puts on his own chainmail, and it's his old chainmail, and he asks his buddy, how does it look? He says, you look like a chicken stuffed into a sausage casing. He says, I'm going to take that as a compliment. He says, I don't see why you shouldn't. Oh, that was a lot of fun. But it's the funny bits. There's dark and funny bits throughout all my stuff. And then I think before that, The Last Tsar's Dragons with my mom was an alternate history. It was the Russian Revolution with dragons, and that was a lot of fun. It's always great writing with her. And that was a lot of fun research, learning about Rasputin and the Tsar and all that insanity, which did not get less crazy if you add dragons to it. Which they
Okay.
were of course red dragons. And Tachyon
Yes.
has got to be one of my favorite publishing houses. Little publishing house, but they do great stuff, and they're just every one of them, from the editors to the marketing and the publishers, are just great to work with. So that was a lot of fun.
Okay. So what is your favorite research story from any one of the books that you've written?
God, that is a tough question because research might be my favorite part about writing.
Ah,
I just love doing research, and it gets out of hand. I think my favorite research story that I talk about is I wrote a story called, which I call the sad robot story, but its actual title is "The Clock, Having Turned Its Face to the Wall, Still Knows Not the Time." And I sold that to Clark's World. Um, and my favorite bit about writing that was I spent over 6 hours researching turn of the century, early 20th century uh, philosophers for one sentence of dialogue,
wow.
which it's out of hand. But I think every writer you talk to will have a story like that. Yes, I once, the people would be like, yes, I took half a semester of agriculture, for a paragraph in a 3 novel series, whatever. Everyone has something like that because research is an essential part. If you don't like research, it's hard to write.
True. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out the Bad Company um and and sequel?
The biggest challenge I had with them is the same challenge I have with everything I've ever done, and it is sitting down to write. And I tell people I love everything about writing. I love writing, I love research, I love doing timelines and world building and character development, and I like talking about writing, thinking about writing, and I hate sitting down to write. I mean, I'm diagnosed with severe to moderate ADHD, and I'm unmedicated for it. I keep trying meds, but they're not working. So a common thing with that is a resistance and a trouble with transitions. So the transition from not writing to writing is very difficult. Um, and if I can get that, if I can stare at a blank page for a couple of minutes, then I can, the next time I stand up, I'll have 1,000 words written. And if I can do that 2, 3 times a day, I got 3,000 words written. But that sitting down to do it is very difficult. And those 2 minutes for someone with ADHD is an eternity of doing nothing.
Oh, wow.
So I mean that's the eternal challenge of it. But even with that, I managed to get 3 books written and out, which is very slow compared to lots of self-published authors, and of course my mother. But it's the most I've gotten out in a year so far.
3 books in a year is
Yes,
quite a bit,
it's
actually.
a solid pace, but
Okay, so what else can we expect from you in the near future?
a ton of stuff. We've got the picture book coming out with my mom. I've got a book called Deed of Empire, coming out with Crossroad Books sometime this year. Just finished up last edits and cover suggestions with them. So I don't know when that's coming out, but I'm really excited for that. That is the first in a epic fantasy trilogy
Oh,
that I'm working on. I'm halfway through the second book of that, and that again has some very fun characters in it. I've got a 15-year-old girl thief, a bisexual forest raider whose name is the Black Duke, which is hilarious. He tells people to call him the if they're family. Um, he's fun, but it's again funny and dark and violent and brutal in spots and touching in others. And it's really my first time doing the world building first. I wanted a much more complex world. If we want to do a little behind baseball, inside baseball talk about writing, the Mika Beerhand books, I intentionally, when I wrote the first one, I kept the world very small. I mean, it's essentially almost an island nation with night tides that keep it isolated, because I didn't want to. It was my first solo novel, not my first
mhm.
solo novel, my first epic fantasy kind of thing. So I kept the world small. So when I dove into this next trilogy, I wanted a much bigger world. I was ready for that. So I did a whole bunch of world building beforehand, thousands of years of history, empires rising and falling, taking over different territory. And so then I just got 3 characters from 3 different cultures, and started writing, and
Wow.
then eventually figured out where they were going to connect. And
Wow.
so it was very fun. It was kind of an experiment in doing all the world building first.
Do you talk about world building in your books about how to write a fantasy novel?
Yes, in my 3 volume book, 3 volumes of books, How to Write Fantasy Novels, available on Amazon in ebook and paperback.
And at
Uh,
Annie's
that,
Bookstop of Worcester?
oh, excellent. Yes. I do talk about world building. There's a whole section on that. I'm not, And I don't say that it's necessary, but I give some advice about it. And there's some, when you're talking about fantasy, there's a lot of subgenres, and some of them are world building intensive. I kind of talk about it if it's a descriptive heavy genre, then world building is generally more important. Like in epic fantasy, it's difficult to do it without some fairly extensive world building, and readers often expect more description and deeper histories and seeing layers of that in the writing. If you're doing urban fantasy or any kind of intrusion fantasy where the fantasy is coming into the real world, you don't need as much. A lot of that is implied unless the person's traveling to the stuff. But any secondary world stuff, there's going to be some expectations of world building. So I talk about the types of that, doing that. Generally, it's funny because generally with me, I like history and I like myths, so that's how I start. I don't
Mhm.
do scientific world building, but that's also why I'm a fantasist. We are
Right.
afforded a lot more leeway in the science of things than a science fiction author. I mean, science is right there in the genre's name. You can't ignore it. There's we don't have that in fantasy. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Now I have some questions for you about being a writer. What's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Setting my own hours, doing my own thing. I in since 1987, in being a musician and a writer and a professional card player. I mean, I worked a regular job for 5 out of those 20 years, 30 years, however many years, it's 35 years now, 36 years. So, I mean, and freelancing creates its own different set of problems. But they're ones I'm used to, and the sacrifices to do it are ones I'm used to. I'm a bit of a workaholic anyway, so which is kind of needed when you're self-employed. Um, but it's been great, and that also allowed me to spend time with my kids. So I wasn't going off to work all the time, so I got to stay home with the kids and write, and then play with them, and then write and play with them. So that's really my favorite part. Aside from the fact that you get to tell lies for a living, which is also
Great. Okay. And what do you consider the most challenging part of the whole writing process?
again sitting down to do it. That is the hard part. I mean, everything else, and even in self-publishing. So I'm a hybrid writer really now. I self-publish my novels and I sell short stories because it kind of scratches the validation itch of selling them to publishers, and then and then actually being able to make some money on the novels. No, I enjoy doing every bit of it. And as a self-publishing, I'm doing cover design, I'm doing all the promo, I'm doing the advertising, but I actually like math, so that's not so bad. So
Hmm.
all of that. The challenging part is just sitting down to do it.
Okay. So what has been your greatest adventure during your writing career?
I think I took a 6-day trip to Scotland on my own once just to walk the streets of Edinburgh as research, and that was one of my favorite, just pure for the writing adventures. I mean, and I've done I've had a lot of adventures. I've had a long and interesting life, and touring with a rock band for 20 years, and leaving home at 17, and being essentially a homeless drunk for several years there. I've been sober 20 years now. So there's been a lot of strange and sometimes wondrous, sometimes horrible adventures. But as far as just pure for the writing going out, that was very fun. Just staying in St. Andrews and taking the train every day into Edinburgh and finding different neat spots in there, and confirming
Yeah.
stuff I'd already written or discovering new stuff to put in there. That was a very fun thing to do. And I was very privileged and blessed to be able to do that. You know,
Hmm. Yeah, Edinburgh's a gorgeous,
I love
gorgeous
it.
city.
It is my
Yeah.
favorite city in the world.
Yeah, I love Edinburgh myself. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
It's probably the same thing that I tell everybody, and it's that it all counts. Whether you're writing to be published, whether you're writing for fun, whether you're writing fan fiction, whether you're journaling, whether you're writing blog posts, it all counts. It's all writing. And if you're doing that, you're a writer. And never denigrate yourself. There'll be plenty in the world who will do the denigrating for you. Don't pile on with yourself. It all counts. And I'm working on the fourth volume of How to Write Fantasy Novels,
Uh,
which is going to be publishing. And I just wrote the sentence. I said, look, some of the happiest authors I know are just writing fanfic for free for fun. So
mhm. Yeah.
don't, with my family history, I never considered not writing for publication, but apparently people do it and it's lovely, So that was a lesson I had to learn. Um, but it is something I have fully embraced. It's not something I do, but I see it and I respect it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what piece of advice would you want to share with other writers? Is that the piece of advice, or do you
That
have any
that
more?
is that is the big one. The other one I share with people is don't get attached to the idea that you need a sacred block of writing time to write. If you want to write, if you've got 5, 10 minutes, sit down and write a sentence. Don't block yourself. I used to not write if I didn't have like 3 hours. I'd say, well, why bother? I got to go do something in an hour. So why even sit down and bother to write? And that's just another way to keep yourself from writing. Like I said, sitting down to write is the hardest part. And so that part of my journey was kind of getting rid of that. I need the sacred time. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoy the sacred time. I love being able to, close the office door, turn on some music, and know that I've got 3, 4 hours undisturbed time to write. But there's a difference between loving that and having that be a great spot and having and needing it. The life is just too chaotic. And I know everybody says you need to, work it out with your family, that you have these sacred spots to write. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Do you have a family? Have you, they need attention too. And and they don't generally work on your timeline. So there's
Mhm.
kids got to be brought somewhere, the spouses need stuff done. You have chores to do, you're not you know so if you can get rid of that, it really makes things easier.
Okay. Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that you might have helped you with your career?
Yes. First of all, a writers group has been essential for me. But again, there's people with no writers group who write great stuff. But I feel like learning to critique and getting critiqued it just helps you learn to write so much quicker than anything else, especially learning to give critique. Being able to see problems in other people's work helps you to see them in your own. I mean, and it is, but in teaching things, when I was teaching poker, I learned more about poker teaching people how to play it than I did reading about how to play it. Teaching writing, music, it all helps you in your own craft as well. And then I have a great writers group which has improved my writing, exponentially. And then I'm a member of both SEBWI and SIFWA, Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers. Um, both of which, just because I support the work they do, especially SIFWA has a whole section, Writers Beware, which helps kind of expose scam publishing and scam agents, um, who are the worst. Um, So those are the kind of things that I suggest for associations.
Okay. Yeah, I think other people have mentioned that. I think that's such an important thing.
It really is. And some of the other um a lot of the other genre associations are good as well. If you're writing horror, the Horror Writers Association, Crime Writers Association. If you can find a good one, so if some of the local chapters put on, some of the Crime Writers Association will do like morgue tours, or have homicide investigators or coroners come in and give talks and stuff. So that's a lot of fun. I'm also online. I'm a member of a bunch of different things. Liminal Fiction is a Facebook group. The Writers Tribe is a Facebook group. Any, join as many groups as you can and drop any of the ones that are mean. There was a cover design group I was part of on Facebook, but their critiques were mean every
Mm.
time. And you don't have to. That's the first thing I tell people about critiquing is be nice. There's no one learns from being scolded and insulted. And there's no reason to do it. You know,
Very
so
good point.
drop the ones that are being mean, because they're not going to help you. You're just gonna. It's a tough enough business as it is, and it's a tough enough uh, just to be creative. And writing is such a cerebral endeavor that brain health and brain you know evenness is the most important thing. I mean, there's literally almost no physical component to it. So you're not when you learn writing techniques, it's still a cerebral technique. It's not like a lot of other arts where dance, where you're learning moves, or art, where you're learning brush technique, and singing, or it's all cerebral. It's all inside you. So the more you can connect with other people, it kind of brings it outside, and it becomes just so helpful.
Mhm. That's true. Okay. Now I have questions about you as a person.
All right.
What is what is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
I'm really good at pinball.
Okay.
Of all the things that people
Pinball
don't know.
Wizard.
I mean, I'm very open about 20 years sober. I was a rock musician, so I was a drunk and a drug addict. I mean, it's not it's not a big jump. So that's not a secret, and I'm pretty open about everything else, but just no one knows I play pinball so well. Which
Okay,
is
that's
I
good.
probably shouldn't admit that, because now I can't make money on it if people know that already. I'm a bit of a hustler.
Nobody can bet on it.
Yes.
Okay. So what question do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would your answer be?
How are you so damn handsome? And I would say just lucky, I guess. But no one seems to answer that. To quote West Wing, I'm really, really handsome. A lot of people don't get that just by looking at me.
So how are you so damn handsome?
Well, now you're just sucking up. That's not fair. But honestly, it's just good genes.
Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the things that you love, the hobbies and things like that?
I don't know. But I'm very passionate about the art of creation, of
Okay.
of of writing and music. And I played a lot of soccer for a while there, but turns out I really love soccer, but I really hate people who love soccer,
Huh.
who love playing soccer. Uh, and I may have gotten kicked out of a couple of different leagues for fighting. So it's
You love fighting.
I can neither
Ah,
confirm nor deny that. I'm kind of mean. So
but you're not a mean critiquer. Okay.
no, there's no need for that. We were at a party after it was St. Patrick's Day. So I'm an Irish musician. So I had, 12 and a half hours worth of gigs over the past 2 days. So my voice is a little sore, but we were at a little after party in the hotel where we played. And there was someone who just meeting them and they're like, hey, so are you good people? And all my friends were there and everyone went, eh. I was like, oh, let's go with mercurial. Let's say I'm on the side of good. Let's go with that. So I'm kind of passionate about, leftist politics and not having Nazis show up at my gigs. I've chased them off a couple of times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it's not the America's in a big trouble right now. But let's not dive into that, or we'll get mean. But yeah, mostly I'm passionate about music and writing.
Okay. Um, so what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
You're looking at it.
Ah,
This is my writing space. It's a hot mess. Um,
okay.
but I like to read the reports that say a messy working space is the sign of intelligence. And so it's, I like having a lot of books around. I get my instruments around because with the raging unmedicated ADHD, I like to have a lot of projects going.
Mhm.
So a work day for me will involve writing nonfiction, writing fiction, writing poetry, writing music, recording music for my Patreon. Um, so there's a lot of different things. So I like to have all my stuff around me. But I don't organize it terribly well. But luckily, I clean it up every once in a while, and it's super nice, and I love it. And then it doesn't last. Especially,
Okay.
I mean, you can see all the different guitars. I'm in the middle of recording a very angry song called Diderot Was Right. Um, so and just grabbing different instruments and laying down different tracks. I got a keyboard. So we got a keyboard here. I got a keyboard. I got a keyboard here. So
Different types of keyboards, but
that's right.
okay. Uh, so do you have any food or drink or anything else that you have to have with you when you're writing or editing?
Um, Not really because I'm an addictive personality, and I've got a well handled but major depression and anxiety attack disorder. So I had to drop the caffeine along with the booze and everything else. But I
Okay.
do have a little mini fridge here that my wife got me because she loves me. And so I'll put cream and snacks in there, and I'll get a pot of decaf up here, and I'll drink that. But
Oh,
that's about it. My thing is I try not to mythologize or fetishize the art, the act of creation. And I do a lot of writing about this as well, about the intentionality of art. There is definitely, some kind of divine spark, though it might just be depression since they're seeing the correlation between mental illness and creativity. Um, but honestly, 95% of it is doing the work, and a lot of it is technique. And I talk about this in songwriting and in writing stuff. I like to write and record songs, put them on a Patreon, and then write an essay about writing that song and talking about what I was trying to do with it, what I think I accomplished, planning out rhyme schemes and the like, and so kind of dispelling the mysticism about creativity, and the fact that there's a lot of intentionality and just plain craftsmanship uh, behind this stuff.
hmm. So you mentioned earlier that you would listen to music when you were writing.
Hmm.
So what kind of music would you listen to?
Instrumental music or
Okay.
music where the words are in a language I don't speak. Because
Okay.
I can't, if I've got, some people can listen to music with words. with me, and I think it's probably the ADHD, is that it'll latch onto the words, and then I can't put words down on the page. Whereas instrumental music kind of occupies the portion of my brain that's buzzing all the time and interfering with having coherent thoughts about stuff. So the music kind of occupies that, calms it down, and then I write very cleanly.
Hmm.
And generally, the best pure writer fuel that I have found is Swiss New Age electro harpist Andreas Wallenweider.
Wow.
It's pure writer fuel. Whereas my wife was like, "It sounds like we're in the frickin' aquarium. Turn that shit off." I'm like, "No, man, it's groovy." So tastes differ.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I got a bunch of crazy Swedish stuff and a bunch of different stuff from different countries. So if they're singing a language I don't know, it says I got a bunch of the Cirque du Soleil soundtracks. Those are great too.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be able to concentrate on anything else if I were listening to words.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The words screw me up, but
yeah. So, writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help or hinder them with their work. And do you have any of those? And do they
I
help or hinder?
I have none.
Ah, okay.
And partially because I'm mildly allergic to most cats and dogs.
Uh,
Um, I love cats and dogs, and we had one, but also I think also because my childhood is littered with dead kittens.
oh,
Because we kept getting kittens, but we also had a particularly virulent strain of kitty leukemia running through our house. So
uh,
my mom would keep getting cats, and they would keep dying as kittens. So I think that was traumatic.
yeah, I would think
I mean, I
so.
hope it was traumatic. I hope I had strong feelings about this.
Oh,
So now
wow, that's hard.
my eldest child has a fish. That's as close as we are to a pet household here, and both my kids are more allergic than me.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's very tough.
But
Okay.
also, haven't had kids and pets, if I never have to deal with something else's poop again in my life, that'll be fine. That's fine. That's okay.
Okay. Um, so I have two more questions for you.
Shoot,
One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I always have
especially
to
Annie's bookstock in Worcester. That's that's first of all, first and foremost.
I always have to plug Annie's, and you can you can get Adam's books. We will get Adam's books for you at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or send us email at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
The self-publishing stuff is mostly sadly, mostly on Amazon. I would love to buck the trend, but it's hard enough to make a living as a writer without fighting a multi-billion dollar company.
Right.
And we're all just out here trying to survive. But the other stuff is everywhere. I've got books with a bunch of different publishers. So so you can find it on their websites, Barnes and Nobles, libraries, and the like.
Okay, great. And my last question, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
I can be found in many places online, adamstemple.com. I'm on Twitter as Adam Stemple 4. I don't know what the other three are doing, but yeah, I may have been banned under a different username. I can neither confirm nor deny. I was permabanned from Twitter. Instagram, though I'm rarely on there, Adam Stemple Books. Facebook, Adam Stemple Books. You can follow me on my author page on Amazon. I got some hundred or so followers then there too. So I'm not hard to find. I have a Wikipedia page, believe it or not. That's very exciting.
Wow. Yes, I noticed that.
But mostly Annie's Bookstop in Worcester is where you find my stuff.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Adam Stemple,
Thank you.
and we will be talking again sometime. And
Excellent.
good luck with your books.
Thank you, Selena.